Welcome to Executive Insights, the Next Generation of Leaders edition. I'm Nasheen Liu, partner with the IT Media Group, a CIO-centric media company. My guest today is Karen Chen, an executive and agile coach with Adaptovate. In this episode, Karen shares her fascinating story about why she got into engineering. We discuss Karen's leadership style, the value of face-to-face work, and what's it like to be an agile coach. Finally, Karen offers sage advice for our aspiring leaders. Hi, Karen. Thanks so much for joining me and welcome to Executive Insights.
Hi, Nasheen. Thank you so much for having me here.
Well, Karen, I mentioned before that this season is all about focusing on the next generation of leaders. And we showcase two types of guests on the program. One is the next generation of leaders, typically from the millennial and Gen Z categories. And the other ones are seasoned executives who are passionate about talent development. I believe that the decisions and choices we make at a younger age can impact our career and our life. And you certainly made some really big decisions at a very young age. So let's start there. Tell me what inspired you to get into engineering.
I always say that I fell into engineering. It wasn't my dream or my passion when I was a kid to be an engineer. I didn't really know what engineering was. When I was a teenager, I read these books called The Young Astronaut, and it was about teenagers from around the world who were selected to colonize Mars. And I remember, I think I was like 15 or 16 when I read them, and it had such a huge effect on me. I thought it would be so cool to go to another world and colonize it, to be a pioneer, to grow, to build a new society and learn to do that. I thought I was really cool. Now, realistically, I know that that was probably not possible in my lifetime, but it was a great dream to have. So when I was thinking about going to university, I thought about doing something that would help me do work in that space should that opportunity arise. Maybe it's going to the moon rather than Mars. So I decided I was going to study architecture because I was interested in the structures that these astronauts or these colonists would live in. And I would study space science because I want to go into space. When I was 17, it was the year of Canada 125, Canada's 125th anniversary. And there were all these programs across the country to celebrate. And one of them was called the Young Space Ambassadors. And that was a program where if you were a teenager from across the country, they would choose 125 people to join this program. I think it was like 5 days. You spend a couple of days in Toronto, a couple of days in Ottawa, and a couple of days in Montreal to learn about Canada's space program, what we're doing, and things like that. So it was really it sounded really cool, sounded really interesting. I applied, didn't really know other than it's space and I'm in the right age group, so I'm going to apply. And I ended up being selected. So they chose 125 people. That was a really character defining experience for me because this was the first time I was really away from home and away from family. I'm now traveling across, Ontario and Quebec with strangers and just going to learn and do this thing. So for my parents, I don't think something like that was really typical for them growing up. So this was something unusual for them. One of the really memorable experiences during that time, we had talks from various people, one of them including Julie Payette, who was a Canadian astronaut at the time. And in her talk, she talked about her journey, what she was doing, some interesting things. I learned some interesting facts about space travel, like how you're taller in the morning than at night because of gravity. I remember going to talk to her at the end, and she was asking me, "Oh, so, who are you? What are you planning to do? What are you going to study?" So I told her I was 17. I was getting ready to apply. I was going into my last year of high school, and I was going to apply for architecture and do a minor in space science. And she's like, "Okay, well, why do you want to? Why architecture?" I said, "Well, I want to be a colonist. I want to go to Mars." I gave her a whole story about the young astronauts, and she said, "Okay, that sounds great. It sounds wonderful. In Canada, if you want to do that, your first step is to be an astronaut. And in Canada, the three requirements to be a Canadian astronaut is you have to have good health, you need to be bilingual, so brush up on your French, and you need a science degree. And unfortunately, architecture doesn't count as a science degree. So if this is really what you want, maybe think about like what you want to study. And so I was like, okay, all right. And so when I went, so later that year, when I had to start applying for universities, I was thinking about that. I'm like, well, how much do I really want to do architecture versus wanting to go into space? And so because I wasn't married to architecture, I was like, I just want to build stuff that's going to be useful in this new world. I thought, okay, well, I'm not married to architecture. What's the next closest thing? Engineering. I'm going to apply for engineering. And that's how I ended up in engineering because I wanted to go into space and because of those wise words from Julie Piet.
I've spoken with many interesting people on this program or in general, and have heard a lot of very inspiring stories, but yours is definitely at the very top. We tend to tell ourselves and our children and young people in our lives to aim high and sky is the limit. I think having the dream of being the astronaut is
Mhm.
really at the very edge of that limit. Kudos to you. And then also a testament to the fact having the right people in our lives and getting the right advice from early
Mhm.
on can have such a profound impact on us. And having that positive first experience at a young age is so important. And now, fast forward, you're a seasoned executive in a leadership role. What do you do to provide that positive first impression and experience to people who may be starting their career journey? What is your leadership philosophy and style?
When I think about that and I reflect on, that conversation with Julie Piet, it wasn't a long conversation. It was maybe like 3 minutes, but it changed the course of my life. And so I think when we look at that, like we don't know how our words and our actions might affect others around us or how that might be interpreted. And so I think being really mindful of that is important. As a leader, you're now more of a role model, but as a person, like you don't know how what you say or what you do might affect or inspire others. Because I had like that great experience there with Julia Piet. When I was in university, I remember in my first week of university, the upper year engineers and the upper year women engineers being very welcoming. There was a barbecue lunch to welcome, the first year women into the program. And it was partly relationship building, like this is who we are. There's not that many women in engineering. You've got a team. We're here for you. If you have any questions, you need help, like we're here. You're not alone. That was hugely impactful because going to university, especially moving away and like going to residence and living in a different country by yourself, like that's a lot of change. And when you're only like 18, 19, like that's a lot of change. So to know that someone is there looking out for you, is there to be your friend and to help you out, like it helped, it went a long way. Through my later years in university, I would do the same thing for all the incoming students or anyone new joining the program. And that translated into my work life. So in new jobs or new roles or new areas, even if you're in the same company, having someone there, like in the places where people reached out and said, welcome, we're so happy to have you here. How can I help? Any questions you have, like feel free to ask. You want to know how to get to the bathroom? Here's where you go. You want to know the best place to order lunch? That's what we do. You want to figure out how to submit expenses or how to write an engineering work order or whatever that is, like just ask. We're here to help you, right? And so having people do that for me when I was new, when I'm in a role where, where someone new is coming and it's again, change is hard. It might be exciting change, but still it's hard. I try to be that person to like reach out, say hello, say welcome, say, any questions. I'm here to ask, like feel free to ask. I'm here to help you learn and know. And if I can make your life a little bit easier, that's what I want to do. So I've tried to do that with every role that I have. When I go into new place, when new people are joining my current places, like I try to do that as well because I know for me it was like hugely impactful. So I want other people to have that positive experience as well.
Yeah.
And as you talked about, like now that I've been working for many years and in the role that I have, when I retrospect back, like that onboarding experience is really important. Like that's the first impression that somebody gets of like this new place, this new team, this new workplace, this new environment. And and I think that shapes how their experience might be. It's not defines everything. If you have a bad first date, doesn't mean you have a bad like job. And having a good first date might not mean that every day is going to be an amazing day. it comes and goes. But if I can help you have a good first day and I can help you enjoy being here, help you affirm that you made the right choice in coming here and working with me, like I want to do that. So in that sense, that's what I try to do. My philosophy is really put that role modeling, being welcoming, being human.
Very well said. Providing that welcoming experience and also to be mindful that words matter, especially when you're in a leadership position. So,
Mhm.
since the pandemic, our workplace and work culture have become quite complex and nuanced. And as leaders, there's no surprise that we would love to have people around us. We would love to create that collaborative and vibrant culture
Mhm.
and environment. But it's a fact that hybrid working is here to stay, and organizations and leadership are challenged with the
Mhm.
fact that sometimes it's hard to have people come back to the office. And I know based on our conversations earlier that you're a big proponent for
Mhm.
face to face with your colleagues and have received many benefits from that. Why is that so important? And but more importantly, how do you motivate people to want to come back?
So in terms of working, I think that the flexibility that hybrid brings is really important. Like I don't think being prescriptive about work, like number of work days or like where or how, like I don't know if that's going to always be the most productive way to work with people. So I think flexibility, which is what hybrid should be, and what that is rooted on, is very important. In terms of this question around office time and face time, I think it's important to come into the office and have face time with people. So as I was thinking about, the earlier parts of my career, going where, the hybrid workforce or even having laptops was not really a norm, a lot of desktops, not even really cell phones. So you had to come in the office to do your work. What I liked about it was being in the middle of the team, and even if I wasn't working on a project or working specifically on something, I could hear the conversations around me. I could hear my team members talking about it, and that's how I learned. So I was thinking about an example for my very first job post graduation. I was a sales engineer selling manufacturing systems, and a couple of the sales engineers who are more senior than me, like they wouldn't have to go into a meeting room to talk about this proposal they're building for a potential client. They would just like there were only four of us, so we're just sitting in a quad. It was okay for them to talk like in that quad. So one person would turn to the other and be like, "Hey, well, I'm looking at this system. What do you think? Do I have the right equipment? What am I missing?" And the other person would say, "Oh no, that looks good. That looks good. Oh, here, I think it would be good if we did this equipment. We recommend this piece of equipment rather than that one." And then the first person, well, why is that? And they talk through, and then they'd land on it and they work through it. So I wasn't actively part of the conversation, but I could hear them. And I'm now like, oh, so in this situation, you use this type of equipment, but in that situation, you use that type of equipment. So when I build these quotes in the future, now I know the difference and I'm learning that. So I learned a lot just hearing them work through and talk through solutions, talk through problems, and figure out their approach. I learned a lot of that like by osmosis just by sitting there and hearing. And like they were okay if I popped in. It's like, can I don't understand why you do this and that. Like, can you help me understand? They're like, sure, let me talk you through it. So I learned a lot just from being there. If you're not in an environment where you can hear those conversations or have that opportunity to overhear those kind of conversations, you don't really get a chance to learn. So if you're 100% at home and you don't really know how to do something, one, you have to figure out who to talk to get to that learning. And then two, you have to figure that learning. But a lot of times you don't know what you don't know. So being in office, being around people who are doing work and doing things and having those kind of conversations, it's an opportunity to learn or at least to ask more questions. So that's what I found really, really helpful. When I was, early in career and just trying to figure out like there's so much I didn't know, but I don't even know. In my current role and in the nature of our work, I'm a consultant, I'm an agile coach. A lot of this is about relationships and people. So if you're not in a place where you are around people, it's harder. It's not impossible, but it's harder. A lot of what I do when it comes to facilitating workshops or training or conversations or meetings, being able to see body language, to see physical expressions is really important so that I know that if I'm doing training, this isn't landing. I can tell by body language that they're kind of confused, or maybe I need to go deeper in a point. When we're virtual and cameras are off, I don't really know. So it's harder. I don't know if I'm talking to avoid, if it's landing, if people want to feel comfortable. So it's different. It's not impossible, but it's just different. So I like in person because I feel like I can connect with people easier in that way.
What you said is really important. It addresses three very useful points. And the first one is learning by observing. So
Mhm,
you're observing knowledge and you're also
mhm,
observing behaviors and body
mhm,
languages. And
mhm,
the other really important point is about relationship building.
mhm,
And when you're face to face with people, it's so much easier. And even that
mhm.
example of you just popping your head in an office to say, hey, can I ask you a question? It's very hard to do that online if you don't book
Yeah.
time ahead of time. I think really many people don't realize the say about out of sight, out of mind is
Mhm,
very true in a workplace. And
mhm,
when decisions are made, it's so much harder to make a decision not in your favor if they already know you and if they have a relationship with you. So those are really, really important takeaways for
mhm.
people to consider. And you
Yeah.
mentioned early on that in your work as an agile coach, and that is something I really wanted to explore a
Mhm,
little bit too, because being an agile coach, you work with senior leaders and organizations to try to drive change. And that is probably one of the hardest things to do is
mhm,
to change someone's minds and to change their behaviors. But even harder is to sustain that change over time. How do you do it?
I want to start off by saying that thing that drives me the most in my personal life, in my professional life, is really about helping people, especially helping people like do things in an easier way, having an easier life or a better way of working. Like if things are easier, then it's better. So for me, like I want to help you do things in a better way or an easier way. I want to make life easier for you. It's why a lot of the work that I did at GM, it's about, building new cars because we want to build new cars. It's exciting to have a new car. How do I help you do that? When I was a lean coach, it was about like lean, a lot of lean for me is about cutting out non-value added work. If I can reduce the time you spend doing things that are not exciting and not fun, that frees up your time to do things that are interesting. Maybe it is okay, maybe it's not. Usually, people will reach a point where they're like, I'm not okay with the current anymore. Like I really do want the change more than I want the current. And that's when we can, make some progress. So as we're doing it, like there's big changes that you have to do, but along the way, there's a lot of small changes that you do. I like to check in really frequently with people, see how are you doing, how are you feeling, how's that going? We made this change, like how's that going? And if it's like going well, fantastic, it's moving us in the direction we want to go in. And if it's not, well, then what do we need to do? We don't have to keep going with the change. It's okay because the goal is to achieve the result. It's not the how. It's not so much the how we're doing it, but like why are we doing it and are we getting there? So if what we're doing today is going to help us achieve that, then let's stop. We have a conversation, we have a dialogue. If it's not working, we don't have to stay. Like we can change. I think that helps. So for me, when I think about agile coaching, that's very much what it is. There's constant alignment because we're checking in frequently. There's that spirit of continuous improvement. Is this working well? Great. Yes, let's keep going. Not working well? Let's change. And then those iterative adjustments as we go.
To take that approach of not change for the sake of change, but looking
Mhm,
at the outcome you're trying to achieve and really be very concrete and tangible
mhm,
about, those small incremental improvements to make. And the regular check-in really sustains that change will stick. So because this season is all about the next generation of leaders, and I wanted to ask is some lessons learned from you. What would be your three pieces of advice for the next generation of leaders?
Okay, so my three pieces of advice: one, be open. More specifically, be open to opportunity. Don't get stuck on all the ways that something won't work or why it won't work. Think about how you can make it work. So my example would be like with the young space ambassadors, if I start thinking about all the teenagers in Canada who could apply the program and all the teenagers who are smarter or have better grades or more interest in space and why they deserve that place more than me, like I would have talked myself out of applying because I'm going to get a no. But I didn't, I tried, I applied for the chance to get that yes. I was open to the yes, prepare for a no, but also open to the yes. So I think that's very important. Be open. Number two, be adaptable. Changes happen all the time. Sometimes they're expected because you're changing your job, you're going to a new role, you're moving to a new country, you're doing something exciting. And sometimes those changes are unexpected, like the pandemic. Nobody really could have predicted the scale and scope and impact that that pandemic had on like everyone, home life, personal life, professional life. Trying to adapt to those changes the best you can. And again, being open to the first one, like it's okay if what you try doesn't work, we'll try something else. So to me, being open and being adjustable go hand in hand. And then number three goes along with that. It's be kind. It sounds so easy, sounds so different than like the other advice, but really be kind because change is hard. Be kind to yourself when changes are happening. Be kind to others when change is happening. So the example I have here, like going back to the pandemic, and we had to pivot to virtual tools right away. We had to pivot to completely different stuff for not everyone. Some people were used to working remote, but for a lot of organizations, that pivot to fully remote was hard. And so now, the very small example I have is during that pandemic, all our calendars are now full of Zoom calls and team calls. We're on video all the time. For myself, I'm fairly comfortable in video. I mean, I do a lot of training and I do a lot of workshops. So being visible, being present, being at the front of the room is not, it's something I'm comfortable with. Otherwise, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing. However, I also recognize that not everyone is comfortable being on video. So for me, in being kind, so instead of forcing a video on option for like every meeting for all my team members, and I was in a role of like leadership and authority, so I could have mandated and enforced a culture of like video on, but I didn't want to do that because to me that's not necessarily being kind or compassionate to people who are not comfortable doing that. So instead of like allowing people to be video off or forcing video on, I try to find a way to engage with people who are not comfortable the same way I am. So maybe it's like put something in chat. If you don't want to turn your video on, that's okay. Put something in chat, type your answers in chat, or throw up an emoji to say that you agree with the statement or don't agree. You don't have to be on, but I do want you to engage. So for me, it's trying to find other ways to get the result I want, but also being kind and considerate of people who are not necessarily in my same position or feel the same way I do.
Well said. And on that note, thank you so much for your time, Karen, and for all your insights and advice. I really enjoyed this conversation.
Me too. Thank you so much, Nasheen.
You've been watching another episode of Executive Insights. This is the Next Generation of Leaders edition. I'm Nasheen Liu from the IT Media Group. Thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed this video, please check out other content on our YouTube channel, including CIO roundtable conversations and executive interviews. And don't forget to subscribe.